I came back to consciousness in a hospital bed, and the wrong woman was sitting in the chair next to me. My eyes opened slow, the ceiling tiles blurry, and the first face I found belonged to Sofia Reyes, not Stefania. Sofia, my girlfriend's younger sister, had both hands pressed around one of mine, like she was afraid I'd float away if she let go. The second she noticed my eyes were open, she practically jumped out of the chair. "Robert! Hey! Hey, look at me!" I tried to focus on her face instead of the ceiling. Did I die? My voice came out like gravel. Because if this is heaven, somebody skimped on the decorating budget. She laughed, but it cracked halfway through, and she wiped at her eyes with her sleeve. "Don't do that. Don't make jokes right now." Sorry. Reflex. I glanced past her toward the door, half expecting Stefania to walk in with 2 coffees and an apology. Nobody came. "Where's Steph?" Sofia's gaze slid toward the hallway before she answered, which told me everything before she opened her mouth. "She's getting some air." "Getting air?" "Right." I let that sit. A nurse came in before I could push further, checked my pupils with a little flashlight, asked if I knew my name and the date, and told me I'd taken a nasty spill off my bike during the charity ride out by the reservoir. Overheated, lost my balance on the gravel shoulder, went down hard enough to crack my collarbone and rattle my brain around pretty good. "You're lucky you didn't hit the guardrail," the nurse said. "Another foot to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation." Sofia's jaw tightened when she heard that. The nurse said I'd be kept overnight for observation, maybe longer depending on the scans. When she left, I turned back to Sofia. "So, where's your sister, actually?" Sofia sat back down, slower this time, like she was choosing her words with her whole body. She said hospitals make her sick to her stomach. She said she'd come back once you were settled. "And you didn't leave?" "Someone had to sign your discharge forms eventually. Might as well be the one who isn't allergic to fluorescent lighting." I almost smiled at that. Except something about the way she said it made my chest hurt worse than my collarbone did. Sofia was supposed to be an afterthought in my life. The little sister who showed up at holidays and argued with Stefania about whose turn it was to host. Instead, she'd apparently been in this chair long enough to know exactly which vending machine had the good pretzels, because she handed me a bag of them without me asking. "You've been here a while," I said. "Define a while?" "Define it for me." "Since they wheeled you in, 9 hours, give or take." 9 hours. Stefania had texted twice. I checked my phone under the blanket, screen cracked but readable. "Steph, OMG, are you okay? Text me when you wake up." Then 40 minutes later, "This is so scary. I can't even think straight." Nothing about coming back. Nothing about which room I was in. Sofia watched my face while I read it, not pretending she wasn't watching. "She loves you," Sofia said finally, in the flat voice of somebody repeating a line she didn't fully believe herself. "I know." "You don't sound like you know." "I'm concussed. Cut me some slack." That got a real laugh out of her this time, short and surprised, like it escaped before she could stop it. She stayed until visiting hours ended, and when the nurse finally made her leave, she squeezed my hand once and said, "Text me if you need anything." Not her. Me. I mean it. I did not expect to need her nearly as much as I ended up needing her over the following weeks. But that first night in the hospital, staring at the ceiling with a shattered collarbone and a girlfriend who couldn't handle a waiting room, I had a feeling my life was quietly rearranging itself without asking my permission. I'd met Stefania through a mutual friend 8 months earlier, at a rooftop thing I only went to because Oliver dragged me there. And for most of those 8 months, I told myself the relationship felt normal because I didn't have anything recent to compare it to. Sofia, on the other hand, I'd only ever known as background noise at family dinners. The sister who worked long shifts at the animal hospital across town and showed up to holidays smelling faintly of antiseptic and dog shampoo. Always quick with a joke, never the center of attention, and clearly fine with that. I hadn't thought about her twice in 8 months. Not really. And yet there she was at 1 a.m, arguing with a nurse on my behalf about whether I actually needed a second round of scans. Like she'd appointed herself my advocate without asking anyone's permission, mine included. The next morning, Sofia was back before visiting hours technically started, which the nurses seemed to find more amusing than against the rules. She'd changed clothes, at least, and brought a duffel bag she dropped by the window. "I raided your apartment," she announced. "Grabbed a charger, real clothes, and the sad excuse for shampoo you keep in there." "You broke into my apartment?" "Stefania gave me the spare key months ago in case her cat needed feeding while you two traveled. I'm just repurposing it." I studied her while she unpacked the bag with brisk, efficient movements. The kind of person who needed her hands busy to keep from thinking too hard. "Where is she this morning?" Sofia's hands paused over the duffel for exactly 1 second before continuing. "Work thing. A shoot she couldn't reschedule." "A shoot? For the skincare page?" "It's a partnership, apparently. Contractual obligations." Her voice went carefully neutral, the voice of someone reciting a press release she didn't write and didn't love. I let it go, because arguing about my girlfriend's priorities with a broken collarbone felt like a losing battle on every front. The doctor came by around 10, said the scans looked clean, no bleeding, no fracture beyond the collarbone, but they wanted to keep me another night to monitor the concussion symptoms. Sofia helped me eat breakfast when my right arm refused to cooperate with a fork, cutting my pancakes into manageable pieces without making a production out of it. "I can feed myself," I said, mostly out of principle. "You're using your left hand like it personally wronged you. Let me help." "This is humiliating." "This is Tuesday. Eat your pancakes." There was an ease to her that unsettled me a little. The way she didn't fill every silence with noise, didn't make my accident into a story about her own feelings the way Stefania might have. Sofia asked practical questions. Had I eaten? Did my head hurt? Should she call my parents? She kept my phone charged on the windowsill and stepped into the hallway without comment whenever the nurse needed to check something private. Stefania finally showed up around 2 in the afternoon, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, holding an iced coffee she'd clearly bought on the way in. "Oh my God, baby, look at you," she said, leaning down to kiss my forehead like I was a photo op rather than a person. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Hospitals genuinely make me nauseous. You know that." "I know that." "You look better than I expected, honestly." She said it like a compliment. I studied her face for something resembling the panic Sofia had shown the night before, and found only a mild, performative concern, the kind you'd offer a co-worker's minor fender bender. Sofia excused herself to get coffee, which everyone in the room understood was a lie of the same size as the one Stefania had been telling me for months. Except Sofia's lie was kind, and Stefania's was just convenient. Stefania stayed 40 more minutes that day, scrolling her phone half the time, narrating an update to someone on the other end of a call about how exhausting the whole ordeal had been for her. And I remember thinking, with the strange clarity concussions sometimes hand you, that I'd never once heard her describe anything in terms of how it affected me. Everything looped back to her nerves, her schedule, her nausea at hospitals. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was just a kind of gravity, the way some people's whole world quietly bends around themselves without them ever noticing it's happening. And I'd spent 8 months adjusting my own orbit to match hers without complaint. By day 3, I knew the nurses by name, hated the cafeteria food with real specificity, and had started noticing a pattern I couldn't unsee once I saw it. Stefania visited for exactly as long as it took to post a story about the scariest week of my life, with a filtered photo of my hand in hers, then found somewhere else to be. Sofia stayed. She brought real food from the diner 2 blocks over, argued with me about whether I was allowed to check work email, and once physically took my laptop away when I tried to answer a client's message with a fractured collarbone and a mild concussion. "You are not emailing a client about kitchen cabinets right now," she said, sliding the laptop into her bag like contraband. "I'm fine." You called the client ma'am twice in one sentence, and then referred to yourself in the third person. You are not fine. You're loopy, and loopy people should not be discussing cabinet hardware. My best friend Oliver visited that afternoon, took one look at the room, and immediately clocked the situation better than I had. "Where's Stefania?" he asked. Quiet enough that Sofia, refilling my water in the corner, pretended not to hear. "Shoot ran long." "Right. And this one," Oliver tipped his head toward Sofia, "has been here since day 1? She's Steph's sister. She's just being decent." Oliver gave me the look he'd been giving me since college, the one that meant he thought I was being an idiot, but loved me too much to say it outright yet. "Sure, man. Decent." He didn't push it further that day, but I noticed him watching Sofia laugh at something I said, watching the easy rhythm we'd fallen into without either of us deciding to build it. When I got discharged 2 days later, arm in a sling, head still occasionally spinning if I stood up too fast, it was Sofia who drove me home, because Stefania had a thing she absolutely could not move. Sofia carried my duffel bag up 3 flights of stairs without complaint, got me settled on the couch, and stocked my fridge with soup and Gatorade like she'd done a full logistics course on recovering from a concussion. "You didn't have to do all this," I told her, watching her fold a blanket over the back of the couch with more care than the moment probably required. "I know." "Then why?" She paused at that, blanket still in her hands, and for a second I thought she might actually answer honestly. Instead, she said, "Because somebody in this family has to be reliable, and it's apparently not going to be my sister," and went back to organizing my kitchen like the conversation hadn't nearly cracked open into something bigger than either of us was ready for. Oliver came by that first night home, took one look at the fully stocked fridge and the blanket folded with hospital corner precision, and raised an eyebrow at me over Sofia's head while she rummaged in a cabinet for a soup pot. "You need anything else, man?" he asked, loud enough for her to hear, clearly enjoying himself. "I'm good." "You sure? Because it looks like somebody already thought of everything." Sofia threw a dish towel at him without turning around, which told him everything he apparently already suspected. And he left 20 minutes later grinning like a man who'd just won a bet nobody else knew he'd made. The truth came out on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the accident, in the parking lot of the physical therapy office. Stefania showed up unannounced, which should have been my first warning, since she hadn't shown up unannounced anywhere in the 8 months we'd been together. "We need to talk," she said, arms crossed against the wind. About what? About us. About how you've basically moved my sister into your apartment. She's been helping me because you haven't been able to. That landed wrong on her face, sharper than I expected. I have a life, Robert. I have a career. I can't just drop everything because you fell off a bike. You didn't just drop everything. You dropped me. There's a difference. She didn't have a quick answer for that, which was rare for her. And for a second, I saw something almost like guilt cross her expression before she buried it under irritation instead. You're being dramatic. I spent 9 hours in a hospital bed and you texted me twice. Your sister sat in a plastic chair all night so I wouldn't wake up alone. I'm not being dramatic, Steph. I'm doing math. So what? You're into her now? Is that what this is? The question hit harder than it should have, mostly because some part of me had been quietly circling the answer for weeks without letting myself land on it. This isn't about her. This is about you disappearing every time things got hard, and it not being the first time. Because it wasn't. It was the missed calls when my father had his knee surgery. It was the eye rolls when I talked about wanting to start my own contracting business instead of staying comfortable at the firm. It was 8 months of me making myself smaller so the relationship would feel easier. And somewhere along the way, I'd stopped noticing I was doing it. I think we're done, I said. And the words came out steadier than I felt. Stefania's face went through surprise, then anger, then something closer to relief that she tried to hide fast. Fine. Great. Have fun with my sister, since apparently that's the plan now. She left before I could tell her that wasn't the plan. Not yet. Not out loud, anyway. Though the shape of it had been sitting in my chest for a while. Patient and quiet. Waiting for me to stop pretending I hadn't noticed it. I sat in my truck for a long time after she drove off, replaying 8 months in fast forward, all the small moments I'd talked myself out of noticing. The birthday dinner she rescheduled twice for work events that turned out to be optional. The way she corrected my stories at parties like I couldn't be trusted to tell my own life accurately. The number of times I'd said it's fine about something that wasn't, just to keep the peace. Until I realized peace bought at that price wasn't peace at all. Just a longer, quieter kind of losing. Sofia found out about the breakup from her mother, Stella, who found out from Stefania in a phone call that apparently included several unflattering descriptions of me, and somehow, of Sofia too. She showed up at my apartment that evening holding a grocery bag and wearing the expression of somebody who'd rehearsed a speech the entire drive over and forgotten most of it by the time she arrived. I heard, she said, before I could get a word out. I figured you would. Stella thinks I did something wrong. Stefania apparently told her I was, quote, circling like a vulture. I winced. You weren't circling anything. I know that. You know that. Stella's still deciding. She set the grocery bag down harder than necessary. This is a mess, Robert. My sister hates me a little right now. My mother's confused. And I've spent 3 weeks pretending I wasn't falling for my sister's boyfriend while bringing him soup like some kind of lovesick nurse. The words hung in the kitchen between us. More honest than either of us had planned for that evening. You were falling for me? Don't make me say it twice. I might need you to. I'm concussed, remember? Slow processing. She threw a dish towel at my head, which I caught with my good arm, and something in the tension finally broke into a laugh that neither of us fully controlled. I didn't plan this, she said, quieter now. I want you to know that I wasn't sitting in that hospital chair thinking about anything except whether you were going to wake up. I know. And then you did. And you made a stupid joke about heaven's decorating budget. And I just... She stopped, shook her head. I just knew, I guess. I hated knowing it. Why hate it? Because it's messy. And it's my sister. And my mother is going to need 6 months and a lot of therapy to accept it. And because falling for someone while they're in a hospital bed feels like the kind of thing you regret later, I crossed the kitchen, careful with my sling, and stood close enough that she had to tilt her head up to keep looking at me. I've had 3 weeks to think about regret. This isn't it. Stella did, in fact, need more than 6 months, though she got there eventually. Oliver, for his part, showed up the next weekend with a 6-pack and zero surprise on his face. Finally, he said when I told him. I've been waiting since the hospital for you two to catch up to the rest of us. A month after the parking lot conversation, Sofia stood in my kitchen holding a stack of my folded shirts and said flatly, "This is ridiculous." I looked up from the drawer I was fixing one-handed, sling finally gone. The drawer? Us, pretending we don't basically live together. I have 3 pairs of shoes here. I know which cabinet the mugs go in. Your neighbor waves at me like I pay rent. Move in, then. She blinked at me like I'd suggested something reckless. That's fast. You've been building the case for a month. I'm just agreeing with the evidence. Robert, I mean it. I don't want to be your rebound or your convenient landing spot after Stefania. You're not either of those things. You're the person who sat in a hospital chair for 9 hours because you couldn't stand the thought of me waking up alone. That's not convenient. That's just you. She looked down at the shirts in her hands, fighting a smile and losing. My mother is going to need a warning before she visits. Your mother already knows where your toothbrush is. I think she's caught up. Stella did visit, eventually, 3 months later, arriving with a casserole dish and a stiffness in her shoulders that softened slowly over the course of dinner. Especially once she noticed how Sofia laughed easier around me than she had in years, according to Stella herself. You were quieter before, Stella told her daughter over coffee, studying Sofia's face like she was seeing something new in it. I didn't notice I was quiet. Mothers notice everything eventually, even the things we get wrong at first. She looked at me then, an apology sitting plainly on her face. I said some things when this all started, about vultures and timing. I was wrong about most of it. You were protecting your daughter. I get it. I was protecting the wrong daughter, for a while. She reached across the table then and squeezed Sofia's hand. An unremarkable gesture that still made Sofia's eyes go glassy for a second, before she blinked it away and reached for her coffee instead. Your father would have liked him, Stella added, quieter, mostly to Sofia. He always said you picked people who made you smaller. This one doesn't. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just refilled everyone's coffee and let the silence do the talking, which felt like the right kind of silence for once. Not the kind I used to swallow to keep a different peace. Stefania, from what I eventually heard through the family grapevine, moved 2 states over for a new marketing job and a fresh start, telling people she needed distance from toxic family dynamics, which nobody in the family bothered correcting out loud. Though Oliver had opinions about it privately and shared every single one of them with me over beers. Almost a year after the accident, Sofia and I hosted our first real dinner in the apartment we now both called home without qualifying it. My parents came, Stella came, casserole in hand out of habit now rather than nerves. Oliver showed up with a store-bought pie he swore was homemade if you didn't examine the receipt too closely. At one point, I stepped into the hallway to take the trash down, and when I came back, I caught Sofia through the open door, laughing at something my mother said, completely at ease, not performing for anyone, not standing in anybody's shadow. Just there. The way she'd been there since the night I opened my eyes in a hospital bed and found the wrong sister holding my hand. Except by then, I'd stopped thinking of her as the wrong one at all. She caught me watching and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing. That was not a nothing face. I crossed the kitchen and took the stack of plates out of her hands so I could kiss her, quick enough for the room, long enough for her to get the message underneath it. Oliver groaned from the table. "We're trying to eat over here." "Let them be," my mother said, smiling into her wine glass. And Sofia's face went warm, but she didn't pull away. Not even a little. Later, after everyone left and we stood in the kitchen surrounded by dishes, she leaned against the counter looking tired in the plain, real way that had nothing performative left in it. "You know," she said, "when you first woke up in that hospital, I figured the best case scenario was you'd get better and never think of me as anything except your girlfriend's sister who happened to be in the room." I turned off the water. I looked at you differently before I even admitted it to myself. Just took me a while to catch up out loud. Good. I wouldn't have trusted it happening all at once anyway. She stepped closer, arms sliding around my waist, chin tipped up. "I'm glad I stayed that first night." "So am I," said, and meant it more than almost anything I'd ever said. I woke up in a hospital once looking for the woman I assumed would be there. I found instead the one who actually stayed, who kept showing up long after showing up stopped being easy. And somewhere between the vending machine pretzels and the folded blanket on my couch, that turned out to matter more than anything I thought I wanted going in. We weren't perfect after that, not by a long shot. There were awkward holidays where Stella still slipped and called Sofia by the wrong tone of voice. Uncertain pauses at family gatherings where nobody quite knew what to say about any of it. Moments where old habits crept back in and one of us had to call the other one out gently before it calcified into something worse. But we stopped treating our own happiness like something that needed permission from a room full of people who hadn't lived through the 8 months that led us here. Some nights, when I try to downplay a bad day at work the way I used to, Sofia just stands in front of me until I say the real version out loud. And some nights, when she starts apologizing for wanting an evening to herself, I toss her the car keys and tell her to go. That I'll survive on my own for a few hours without turning the kitchen into a crime scene. It isn't a movie. It's better. Because it's ours, built slow and on purpose, starting from a hospital room where the wrong sister turned out to be exactly the right one all along. Sometimes Oliver still brings it up at dinner parties, tells new people the story like a party trick. The guy who fell off his bike and woke up falling for the wrong sister instead. Except he always corrects himself halfway through now. Not the wrong sister. Just the one nobody expected, including me, until she was standing in my kitchen with a stack of towels telling me the whole arrangement had gotten ridiculous. I used to think love was supposed to announce itself loudly, fireworks and certainty from day one. Turns out it can also show up quietly, in a plastic chair, at 1 a.m, holding your hand while you sleep and asking nothing in return, except that you wake up.